माँ भर दो। जग जीवन के सूने घट को, जग जीवन के सूने घट को अमृत से भर दो। भर दो माँ भर दो, भर दो माँ भर दो। कहाँ राह है कौन दिशाएं, कहाँ राह है कौन दिशाएं, मन के आश्व कहाँ ले जाए, मन के आश्व कहाँ ले जाए। यह संदेश कहाँ से आए, यह संदेश कहाँ से आए। भूले भटके अंधकार को, भूले भटके अंधकार को तुम ज्योतित कर दो, तुम ज्योतित कर दो। भर दो माँ भर दो, भर दो माँ भर दो। नभ से स्वर्ग उतरते भू पर, नभ से स्वर्ग उतरते भू पर, नरकों के सब उठते ऊपर, नरकों के सब उठते ऊपर। देव दैत्य का अंतिम संगम, देव दैत्य का अंतिम संगम, विजय हेतु इस महासमर में, विजय हेतु इस महासमर में। नए मंत्र स्वर दो, नए मंत्र स्वर दो। भर दो माँ भर दो, भर दो माँ भर दो। इस धरती के तोड़ो बंधन, इस धरती के तोड़ो बंधन। मुक्ति मधुर हो तृप्ति चिरंतन, मुक्ति मधुर हो तृप्ति चिरंतन। दिव्य बने ये है मानुष तन मन, दिव्य बने ये मानुष तन मन। इस विरही माटी को माता, इस विरही माटी को माता, उसका ईश्वर दो, उसका ईश्वर दो। भर दो माँ भर दो, भर दो माँ भर दो। जग जीवन के सूने घट को, जग जीवन के सूने घट को अमृत से भर दो, भर दो माँ, भर दो, भर दो माँ, भर दो, भर दो।
Namaskar, my dear brothers and sisters, boys and girls. The love and blessings of the Mother and Sri Aurobindo to all of you from Sri Aurobindo Ashram, Delhi branch. In this devotional song that you just heard, in the melodious voice of Dr. Maitri Karak, you heard a poetic and musical rendering of a popular mantra, Asatoma Sadgamaya, Tamasoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya. Let me move from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge, from mortality to immortality, and so on. Here the devotee is once again aspiring for and praying for the boon that let me get the nectar of immortality. That's how one will move from mortality to immortality, the nectar of immortality, Amrit, and for moving from ignorance to knowledge. But the devotee doesn't stop there. The devotee goes on more along the lines of the vision of Sri Aurobindo and the Mother, asking for heaven itself being brought down to earth. And how will that happen? By liberating this world, this planet Earth, from the bonds of ignorance. Because that is the basic malady. All others emanate from that one basic malady, that is ignorance, incomplete expression of the consciousness of the Supreme. So that is what this devotional music was about. During the last few days, we have been talking about different schools of yoga, Hatha Yoga, Raja Yoga, Yoga of the Gita, Kriya Yoga, and finally we reached that all-in-one yoga, integral yoga, on which you had 3 sessions, and we'll have yet one more after a few days. But in the meantime, today we move on to the yogic techniques. While integral yoga is not technique intensive, it does admit and approve of the techniques in moderation so that the body-mind instrument stays in a good shape. And today we'll take up the most popular and well-known technique of yoga, that is asana, different types of postures. That is what we shall discuss today. We will not do them, but we'll learn a little more about them so that we can understand more and more how these techniques fit into the overall view of yoga, especially the way Sri Aurobindo and the Mother looked at it. My pranams to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo. The YES program is a part of the celebrations of the 150th birth anniversary of Sri Aurobindo and the 75th anniversary of India's independence. Today's discussion is on the asanas or the yogic postures. Yoga as a physical practice is growing in popularity. It's estimated that in the US there are about 20 million people practicing the asanas these days, asanas and breathing practices of yoga, and which is around 10% of the American population. It has become more popular after 2015 because it was in December 2014 that the Prime Minister of India, Shri Narendra Modi, got approved in the United Nations the declaration of June 21 as the International Day of Yoga. And here are a few people practicing yoga on a road, called Rajpath, stretching from the Rashtrapati Bhavan, that is the President's house, up to India Gate. And here are people assembled to practice these postures. And the session was led by none other than the Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi himself. This is another humorous sort of view of the popularity of yoga. The salesman who is trying to persuade these customers to buy a particular car is telling them, in addition to 16 cup holders, this car comes equipped with 4 dedicated yoga mat storage areas. And this is a page from the coloring book. Children get these books with outlines and they just have to fill in color. This is one of the pages from a coloring book given to a 5-year-old in California. And what it is showing is the Namaste pose, and further the legend under that says that this is one of the ways of greeting, and also this is how the yogic sessions start. Now turning to the topic in a little more along more serious lines, the basic features of an asana have been described very briefly but very beautifully by Patanjali. Sthira Sukha Asanam. An asana is steady and comfortable. One should not be wobbly, and while holding the posture, the person should be perfectly comfortable. As Sri Aurobindo said, that the power of physical immobility, and that immobility naturally implies both steadiness and comfort. Otherwise one can't be immobile, is as important in Hatha Yoga as the power of mental immobility in the Yoga of Knowledge, and for parallel reasons. What is that reason? And the reasons in both cases being parallel, that is the higher mode of expression, or a more highly evolved mode of expression of the divine consciousness influencing the relatively lower or more primitive mode, and that is how the capacity of the lower mode of expression can increase. So in case of Hatha Yoga, it is the prana that influences the physical, so that the capacities of the physical improve, and in case of Raja Yoga, it is the supramental that influences the function of the mental, so that the mental function improves. So in each case, it is the higher principle influencing the lower. And what does it do? It liberates the lower principle from its limitations, because the lower is also a manifestation of the divine, and therefore its capacities are far more than are normally displayed, and that limitation is because of inadequate expression. So one of the things that will allow the higher principle, that is prana, to act on the body, as happens in Hatha Yoga, requires that there should be an immobility. Just as the silence of the mind is important for a principle higher than the mind to be able to act on the mind and liberate it from its limitations. In the same way, for the parallel reason is that in case of the body, again, the body should have that peace, that immobility, which will let prana act on it. So that is why it is important to be steady and comfortable. And how is that achieved? By understanding the overall aim of yoga, which is union with the divine. And if one understands that, what will one be doing while performing these asanas? Thinking of the divine, meditating on the divine. So, as Patanjali has said, by meditating on the infinite, the effort is relaxed. You'll find that you'll achieve that physical immobility. And one of the basic things is that you will not feel the strain. You will be in that posture, holding the posture, and yet you will be hardly making any effort. So, prayatna shaithilya. And how is that prayatna shaithilya? That is relaxation of effort achieved through ananta samapatti bhyam, meditating on the ananta. Ananta is one which has no ending. The one which has no ending, no beginning, and for that matter, no beginning and no end. That is the infinite. And that is what enables a person, even while in a posture like Dhanurasana to have a smile on the face, as you can see here, the sweet child Deepa with a smile on her face while in the Dhanurasana posture. To recapitulate what we did earlier, the different stages in performing an asana are that we have a starting position. Generally, we call it sthiti for that posture. So a starting position, and from that we go to a final position through a series of slow, gentle, harmonious movements, and then stay in that final position. The final position need not be necessarily the same for everybody. Depending upon the flexibility of the body, the person goes to a position that is final for that person and stays there. And while staying there, very soon, if the person truly meditates on the divine or thinks of the wider aims of doing that posture, the person will find that that relaxation of effort will come, and the person can stay in that position for a considerable time. But then the person has to come out of that posture. Even if the person can stay longer, the time may not be available to stay for too long in each posture if you want to do 15-20 postures. So the person starts coming out of that once again in a slow and gentle manner and reaches a relaxed position. So you'll see that stretch keeps alternating with relaxation. We start with relaxation. A person is in a position of stretch, but an enjoyable stretch while holding the posture, and then returns once again when the person comes out of the posture to a relaxed posture. So stretch keeps alternating with relaxation. Further, in yogic postures, movements are synchronized with breathing. And the principle is simple. You'll rarely find in any book described exactly during which phase of movement you should inhale and during which phase you should exhale. This is something one picks up while learning it from a teacher, and then further one then arrives at one's own pattern based on a general principle, because one picks up the general principle behind the synchronization. The general principle is that when you are stretching yourself out, you inhale, and when you are folding up, squeezing yourself, then you exhale. And makes sense, for example, if you have to squeeze water out of a towel, what do? You turn it around like that. So you are squeezing yourself. When you are squeezing yourself, folding up something, then things fall out. So in the same way, you let out air while doing that. So that is the basic principle. And another general principle you pick up is that generally when you are coming out of a posture, you exhale rather than inhale. And how do you achieve that? Because during the posture, you continue breathing. So you are inhaling and exhaling both. One very sort of convenient way and nice way of doing that is that when you decide that now I have to come out of this posture, you actually stretch yourself a little more in the same posture, and while stretching yourself a little more, going a little beyond where you are holding the posture, you inhale, and then you start coming out of the posture and exhale. So you'll be almost always in almost every posture exhaling while coming out, and that feels more natural than inhaling while coming out of the posture. So if one understands these basic principles, one doesn't have to get confused and keep asking again and again, when should I inhale, when should I exhale? So it's the basic principle that is important, and you'll rarely find it written in books. You'll not find it written in books which phase you inhale and which phase you exhale, because I taken for granted that once you pick up the general principle, then you will be able to decide on your own when to inhale and when to exhale. And towards the end of the posture, it's very comforting as well as easy if you just stretch yourself a little more, go beyond where you have been holding the posture, inhale while doing that, and then exhale as you come out of the posture to a relaxed position. Now all this synchronization with breathing, meditating on the divine, all this needs has one basic requirement, that is the asana should be done with full consciousness, full awareness. And one of the things that contributes to it is that one performs the movement in a slow, gentle, graceful, harmonious manner. So here is Deepa doing Trikonasana. So she's going into Trikonasana, and while going, you are raising the arms slowly. And then when the arm is horizontal, you turn the hand around. But then you don't turn it around like the way you do in PT, like this. Don't do it that way. A little before you are actually, before the arm is actually horizontal, you start turning the hand slowly. And you have turned the hand completely by the time you've gone a little beyond the arm being horizontal. So the movement of the arm continues, the slow movement continues. You start turning the hand before the arm becomes perfectly horizontal, and you continue it beyond the point where it was perfectly horizontal. So even the movement of the hand is very slow and gentle and resembles the type of movement a dancer would, the way a dancer would move her hand while dancing. So that is what gives that full consciousness to the movement. You are fully conscious, and also the joy of doing it. Here's a mother talking of the same thing, that not only the movements should be conscious while doing the yogic practices, but they should have a spillover effect on all our movements. All our movements should become conscious. All the movements you make when dressing, taking your bath, tidying your room, and yesterday you heard from Dr. Alok Pandey, even while brushing your teeth. Make all these movements conscious. Going up and down the stairs, for example. And it's a very important example because that is one time, when one can do it very nicely. Say, each step, you can even chant the mother's name as you are doing it. Going up and down the stairs, go up with the consciousness of all muscles which are working and of making them work harmoniously. So pay attention to the way the muscles are working in the body as you are moving, and wonder at the marvel it is, because the muscles following our will and acting in a coordinated manner, so many muscles working in a coordinated manner like an orchestra, making it possible for us to climb the stairs or come down the stairs, is itself a marvel which one probably doesn't appreciate. We take it for granted, but you would appreciate it much more if you just think of how difficult the same thing becomes for a person who's paralyzed. Coming to some more unique features of the yogic postures, compared to other exercises, these postures give us a top to toe workout. Even a single practice like Surya Namaskar does it, but of course that doesn't mean that we should restrict ourselves to Surya Namaskar. If one does a judiciously chosen set of 15-20 asanas, the way we have been doing it during the last few weeks, you get a top to toe workout. Hardly any joint or muscle in the body is left out. And that doesn't happen with all other exercises. For example, if you are jogging, it's mainly the legs that get the exercise. If one is weightlifting, it's mainly the arms that get the exercise. This type of a top to toe workout in which nothing, not even the eyes are spared. You also have eye movements. So the little muscles that move the eyeballs are also taken care of. Now the fact that the movements are slow, gentle and conscious, graceful and harmonious. Stretch alternates with relaxation. And there's a relaxation between the postures. There's sessions of Shavasana or Makarasana interspersed between the postures. And there's a relaxation at the end of the session, generally in Shavasana. And each pose is followed by a counter pose. All these things make these practices very relaxing. Now what is this pose and counter pose? The counter pose is a movement in the opposite direction. So if the body has bent one way, say for example in Setu Bandhasana, in the asana that immediately follows, that is Pavan Muktasana or wind release pose, the movement is in exactly the opposite direction. And the result is that the stretch generated by the bridge pose is neutralized while doing the wind release pose. Or another example here, the stretch generated by the camel pose or Ustrasana is neutralized when a person is doing the mountain pose or Parvatasana. But don't ask me what are the counter poses for these poses. Here is a couch potato who may be either in the hungry panda pose munching on potato chips, or turn into a thirsty hippo enjoying a coke, or his curiosity might find an expression in picking up the remote, the TV remote, and switching channels. So all these features, the slow and gentle movements, stretch alternating with relaxation, the relaxation between the postures, the relaxation at the end of the session, and each pose being followed by a counter pose leads to this person being relaxed rather than exhausted at the end of the session. This is quite a contrast with many other type of sports and activities like going to the gym or jogging and so on, which leave a person exhausted. Here at the end of the session, the person is in fact relaxed, not exhausted. And as Sri Aurobindo has said, the experience in the practice of asana is not that of cessation and diminution of energy by inertia. One may feel that one is going into a state of immobility and therefore that leads to inertia. But actually it's not inertia. One is just preparing that silence, bodily silence, that lack of commotion, which will let prana act in the body. So it's not inertia in that sense. So not that of cessation and diminution of energy by inertia, but of a great increase in pouring circulation of force, the pranic force. And because of this, if one does the postures with this type of awareness, an injury is extremely unlikely during yogic postures. There are a few other pragmatic advantages, practical advantages. The fact is that a person may be having pain somewhere and that part may not move properly. Then one can omit a few postures, but a few postures are generally always possible, irrespective of any pain or discomfort in some part of the body. Further, one can do them at home, which is a great convenience because saves time and effort on commuting. One can do them at home in any dress. Of course, any dress means that there should be no limitation to the flexibility of the body, a dress that allows free movement in any weather. It's sometimes too hot outside, sometimes too cold, sometimes it's raining, but at home one can do it and therefore one can be regular. The weather need not be a deterrent. How can I go in such cold or hot weather? It's raining, so it's impossible to go and so on. So one can do them in any weather and without any equipment. So it's not necessary that the asanas require that one should have a designer mat with Om inscribed on it. That's not necessary. These are all sales gimmicks. Now, what are the some of the sort of important benefits, if one were to enumerate them, of these practices? So far as the physical function is concerned, one is able to relax the muscles. That is the first priority in yogic postures, to be able to relax. Because normally when we feel that we are lying down and we are relaxing, the muscles are not working. When the muscles are still working, we are not totally relaxed. And that's why you have seen that during Shavasana, we make a voluntary effort to relax each part of the body one by one till the whole body is relaxed. And this can be tested physiologically. There's a technique which monitors muscle activity, electrical activity in the muscles, which corresponds to their contraction. And this type of a recording is called an electromyogram. And one finds that if one does an electromyographic recording, an EMG recording as it's called, on a person who is just lying down but has not made any voluntary effort to relax, you can see considerable activity in many muscles of the body. But then when the person, after the person has made that voluntary effort to relax, as we do in Shavasana, then only EMG silence is achieved. You find that there's no activity in the muscles. So one learns to relax the muscles completely. And the next priority in these practices, and which is important again, is that the body becomes more and more flexible. One can bend a little more in each direction after doing these practices regularly. So it improves the flexibility of the body. Thirdly, one wants to be fit, and one of the best indicators of fitness is how fit our heart and respiratory system are. And one finds that through the yogic practices, the cardiorespiratory fitness improves remarkably. Now, to some extent, this is related to the intensity of the exercise. And that is why people try to do more intense exercises. If one does more intense exercise, then what is happening is that you're encroaching on the reserve function of the heart and the respiratory system. Normally, at rest, that reserve is not being used. And if we do not use something in the body, it tends to atrophy, it becomes weaker. On the other hand, if we keep using anything in the body, it becomes stronger. Like, if you don't use any set of muscles, the muscles go weak. Whereas if one uses the muscles regularly, they become thick and more strong. And that's why, depending upon what type of a job a person does, those muscles become stronger. For example, if a person cuts wood and is using a lot of the axe, or that person's arm muscles will become stronger. So anything which is used more in the body becomes stronger. So, normally we are not making full use of the capacity of the heart and the lungs. There's a lot of reserve, and we are not encroaching on that. And therefore the reserve keeps falling. But if a person takes regular exercise, then the person is encroaching on that reserve, and therefore the reserve stays and can improve. Now, to what extent that reserve will improve will depend upon how much we are encroaching on the reserve. And if the person uses almost the entire reserve, at least for a short period, 15 minutes, half an hour every day, then that reserve will tend to increase still further. And that is what can happen in very intense exercises of the type, say, jogging for a long time or going to a gym and doing heavy exercise. But then in yogic postures, the energy consumed is much less than in those intense exercises. But the paradox is that the improvement in cardiorespiratory fitness is quite comparable to what happens in far more intense exercises of the other types, like jogging and gymming. Now, what is behind this paradox? The explanation for this paradox is that the reserve improves as a result of those reflexes coming into play in the body, which are activated during intense exercise. So it is those reflexes that lead to that adaptation, and which brings out that reserve, makes that reserve actually manifest itself. So a person during those intense exercises is encroaching on that reserve, and that reserve is getting used as a result of some reflexes in the body taking over or getting energized. Those reflexes are getting activated. In case of yogic postures, those reflexes get activated to the same extent as they do in intense exercises of the other types, not because the exercise is intense, but because there is a remarkable fluctuation in the thoracic and abdominal pressures. Because that is what is happening also in intense exercises. And one of the stimuli for those reflexes getting activated is the change in these pressures. Now, those pressures are changing in these yogic practices to the same extent as in intense exercises, although the exercise itself is not very intense. And that is what explains this paradox, that the improvement in the cardiorespiratory fitness achieved by these yogic postures is quite comparable to what happens in far more intense exercises of the other varieties, the usual varieties like jogging and gymming. Then, the person also improves the adaptation to environmental stresses like cold, heat, high altitude, and also to some inbuilt sort of changes like aging and the immunity to infections. So all these are stressors arising from the environment or from within the body. And aging, is partly because of the stressors being generated within the body, like say the free radicals being generated, reactive oxygen species as they are called. So that is one of the explanations for the process of aging. Of course, that's a complex phenomenon. We're not talking about the mechanisms of aging right now, but the fact is that yogic practices can slow down aging. And when it comes to tolerance to heat and cold, again, they can do a remarkable job. There are documented cases of yogis sitting in in the Himalayas when it's intense cold with very little clothing, and they have developed through these practices the capacity to generate heat within the body to such an extent that if in that cold you cover them with a wet bed sheet, after some time the sheet dries up, the water just evaporates because of the heat generated in the body. And you can try it to some extent yourself sometimes if you like, not to that extent, but what you can do is, instead of doing the anulom vilom the way we normally do it, that alternate nostril breathing, you breathe in through the right and breathe out through the right, or breathe in through the right and breathe out through the left every time, which means you are always breathing in through the right. So breathe in through the right, out through the left, in through the right, out through the left, in through the right, out through the left. Now if you breathe in through the right side, you activate sympathetic nervous system which generates heat. And you'll find that you'll start feeling warm. So if any time you find that in the cold you have, for some reason, you don't have as much clothing as you should have had, just do that for a few minutes and you'll find that you'll not feel cold anymore. So yogic practices improve our adaptation to stressors such as cold, heat, high altitude, aging and infections. But although these practices are physical, because of the awareness that we bring into them, they also improve mental function. But before we go to mental function, they improve flexibility. So this lady came for a job interview and she was asked whether she's flexible, and she's demonstrating how flexible she is. And the interviewer is telling her, when I asked you how flexible you are, I was talking about your hours, not about your body, how flexible you are in terms of the hours you will work. So mental benefits. So there are also mental benefits. There's reduction in stress. Any type of bodily reduces mental stress, but yogic postures do it more effectively than other types of physical exercise because of the consciousness that we bring into them, because of the relaxation that is achieved, because of the peaceful surroundings in which they are done, and so on. So many things contribute to that stress reduction, and of course eventually we'll take you to the stage of becoming yoga teachers through the subsequent modules. So one of the things that contributes to stress reduction is also the sweet and soothing voice of the yoga teacher. Then it improves mental, the ability to concentrate, better cognition, and shorter reaction time. That is something, of course, it has not done to me. My daughter calls me a tube light, and Aditi will start doing the same soon. It improves resilience. Now, resilience of mental function corresponds to the flexibility of the body. And better emotional regulation. And only the other day we were talking about the importance of emotions. So the person can regulate one's anger and understand other people's emotions also. So if one can regulate one's own emotions, the emotions of others whom one is dealing with, it not only makes life more pleasant for everybody, it also makes the person more successful in life. Now again, about the improvement in the mental function, being able to think better, draw conclusions which are well considered rather than hasty. So this lady is saying, thanks to yoga, I now gently stretch to conclusions instead of jumping to them. See, the physical and the mental have counterparts all along, even in the way we speak. What the asanas don't do, and people sometimes expect they would do. They're not very good by themselves for losing weight because they don't consume much energy. Losing weight depends primarily on energy balance. So if you're not spending much energy, they can't contribute too much to losing weight. But then mark the word by themselves. Why by themselves? Because if we practice yoga as a whole, then the person does lose weight or maintain weight. If the weight is normal, the person will be able to maintain. Why? Because the person will eat healthy food. And when we come to nutrition in the next module, you'll see that if the food is healthy, you can't easily overeat. The simple reason is that not only because healthy food is not very palatable, but healthy food is a high fiber food. High fiber food needs more effort to chew. And if you have to put in effort to chew the food, you tend to eat less, not only because you get tired, but it has been shown that after starting a meal, when you stop eating, doesn't depend only on how many calories the meal had, it also depends on how much time you have spent on eating. That actually is the more important determinant. And on an average, it has been seen that after a person has been eating for 20 minutes, irrespective of how many calories have gone in, the person feels that now I'm full. So that 20 minutes, if it is spent on eating high fiber food, you'll take much less calories than on, say, something like ice cream or cake. You can eat a lot of ice cream and cake in 20 minutes, but you can't eat that many apples in 20 minutes. So I'm giving you absolutely two contrasts. So If you eat apples, a whole apple, you'll get very few calories in 20 minutes. And if you eat cake or ice cream, probably you'll have to give up much before 20 minutes and still you would have overeaten. So these are, and then another thing that happens in yoga is you overcome your attachment to sensory pleasures. And food is one of the important sensory pleasures. So when you start eating for need rather than for greed, once again, that contributes to loss of weight. So yogic postures may not by themselves help in losing weight, but a person who is actually practicing yoga in the true sense of the word will not easily put on too much weight. And if the person is overweight, the person will be able to lose weight. But not because of the postures alone, because they don't consume by themselves much energy. Then yogic postures are not the best way to strengthen muscles. They improve the capacity to relax. They improve flexibility, but they don't strengthen the muscles much. Why? Because strengthening of the muscles requires repetitive movements and working against resistance. You know, the way the physiotherapists do. The physiotherapists want to strengthen certain muscles, and that's why they give repetitive movements, and after the person can perform the movement normally, then they further strengthen the muscles by adding resistance. They make the person carry, say, a half a kilo weight, then the person can, when the person can do that easily, then they increase it to 1 kilo and then 1.5 kilo and so on. Every few days they keep increasing the weight. Now that weight is resisting the movement which that muscle is doing, and by adding resistance to by resisting the movement, the muscle becomes stronger. The muscle has to work more and therefore it gets stronger. We don't do that in yogic postures. So that's why the yogic postures are not the best way to strengthen the muscles. All the same, if a person wants to strengthen muscles, the person should start with yogic postures and continue yogic postures, and along with that the person can also undergo strength training, because what the yogic postures will do is to improve the capacity to relax and also improve the flexibility of the body. That will make the strength training for strength not only easier but also reduce the chances of injury while undergoing that training for strengthening the muscles. So one shouldn't say that, well, I want to strengthen the muscles, so yoga is not for me, I'll go to the gym. Do both. And in fact, for some time, maybe for a few months, do only the yogic postures, so that now you're better prepared to undergo that training without injuring yourself in the gym. A lot of young people are doing that these days. They say, well, I don't like yoga postures, I want more energetic, sort of something more energetic and vigorous, so I go to the gym. And they think that that's better because they are young. Yoga is probably only for old people or who don't want to strain much. But that's not true. Then, you know, another expectation of people is, and this is unfortunately sometimes strengthened by many yoga teachers who keep repeating certain myths generation after generation. They hear it from their teacher and they repeat it. Yoga is not a cure for diabetes or hypothyroidism. Firstly, the word cure itself is used very loosely. These diseases by and large are manageable but not curable. If they had been curable, I'm not saying anything is impossible, but then for those miracles to happen, one has to go beyond the usual conception of yoga. But then cure, let's forget about cure, but even say as a substitute for medication. That's sometimes what people mean when they say cure diabetes. I don't have to take any medicine, I do only yogic postures. But that doesn't happen. If it would have happened, the reputation of these postures would have been much more than it is. But all the same, these claims are made. What they can do, how much they can do, maybe on some occasion we'll take up, especially when we come to the module on lifestyle diseases. But the claims for cure of diabetes and hypothyroidism, particularly these two diseases, are grossly exaggerated. So in short, an asana is more than just a movement. One can say, sort of, one were to define it very precisely and briefly, an asana is a conscious movement. But conscious of what? What is the person conscious of while performing those movements? Firstly, of course, the person is conscious of which muscles are moving. You know, as the mother said, just be aware of which muscles are working, are at work when you are climbing the stairs or coming down the stairs, and try to make an effort to make that movement make the function of those muscles harmonious. So one is aware of what the movement is, but then one is also aware of why the movement is. Why am I performing this movement? What is the motive behind it? The motive is union with the divine. So asana is a conscious movement. The person is conscious of what? Conscious of the movement itself and trying to make it more harmonious. Conscious of why that movement is there, for union with the divine, and conscious of how the movement to be done. Yes, but that comes last. Most of the time we are concentrating on how the body has to be moved. It is exactly this way or exactly that way. But that comes the last. So the more important is the what and the why. What and the why of the movement is much more important than the how of the movement. Now that is why, what explains this paradox which the mother is talking about, that the yogi, that the person who is doing the postures in the right spirit, with the right attitude, with the right motive, the yogi who does asanas to obtain a spiritual result, or even simply a control over his body, that is better control, so that the person, pranayama is also a type of a control, isn't it? It's just how it's translated, although actually it's not really control, it is liberating the body of its limitations and letting the prana do a better job. So, but normally it appears as if we are now able to control the body better, and we are controlling the life force. The yogi who does asanas to obtain a spiritual result, or even simply a control over his body, obtains these results. These results means those remarkable results, physical and mental, because it is with this aim that he does them. Sometimes they do it even better than the yogi. They means those people who do not do it with this motive. They do them just as purely as a physical exercise. Sometimes those people who do it purely as a physical exercise do it even better than the yogi. They do these postures much better than the yogi does, but it does not give them stable health. So they are not able to get the same health benefits which the yogi is able to get, in spite of doing these postures much better, because they are not doing it with the right motive. They don't bring the right consciousness into the movement. So even if you are interested purely in better health, it's better to do it with the right attitude rather than feel that, well, I'm not interested in any spiritual benefits, all that is not for me. I just want to have a body that is more fit. Even for that, that works better. So the yogi who does it with the right motive gets much more health benefits than someone who does these postures purely as a physical exercise. So in short, what makes these postures yogasanas? Asana just means a posture. What these makes them yogasana, that is a yogic posture, is the attitude. But then what is that attitude? One can look at it in two ways, both meaning essentially the same thing. That attitude should be that I am doing these postures so that the instrument, the body-mind complex, my body-mind complex should be fit for the work for which I have been brought into this world, the work for which the divine has given me the right talents, abilities, and circumstances. So the least I can do is to at least keep the instrument in good shape so that I can do that work, fulfill the purpose of my life. And that is in my own interest, because if the divine has given me all these abilities and circumstances and chosen me as the instrument for that work, it is in my interest. The divine is trying to give me those opportunities which will help me make my life meaningful, help me fulfill the purpose of my life, because the divine doesn't need anything. The divine has no shortage of instruments, and the divine is not in a hurry. So it is my privilege. So the least I should do is to at least take good care of the body. Like, a factory manager. A good factory manager would like to take good care of the machines in the factory so that they keep working longer. He'll clean them, service them, oil them, to keep them in good shape. So the same applies to the body-mind complex. It has to be kept in good shape and requires that type of servicing, and these asanas are one component in that servicing. So like a manager, and we have been appointed as the managers of this instrument by the divine, so we should take good care of it so that we can use it properly. So that can be one way of looking at the attitude which makes an asana a yogasana. The second is the body is like a temple. And the deity, that is the soul, is hidden. We don't see it, but all the same it is there. But then this temple should be worthy of the inhabitant. The inhabitant is the divine itself, the soul, a spark of the divine. And one will not keep a deity or an idol in a dirty temple. We keep the temple clean because we want it to be worthy of the idol. So why not make this temple, this bodily temple, this body-mind complex? Mind is also, the two are connected, because one can't have just a fit body but then have a mind which is full of dirty feelings and thoughts. Both are important. So this temple, a clean body and a clean mind, that is what will make it worthy of the inhabitant. So that is why we are doing these postures. Because a fit body also acquires a certain type of beauty of its own. So that is the attitude with which these postures should be done. And with this attitude, it's not necessarily only these postures can be done that way. With this attitude, even walking, swimming, cycling, jogging, anything can become yoga, can become a part of our yogic practice. Without this attitude, even asanas remain just asanas, they don't become yogasanas. So once again, an illustration of all life is yoga. Not only these postures, but all the walking, jogging, swimming and cycling, and all the climbing of the stairs up and down, and even all the dressing and bathing and brushing that we do, all this is also an opportunity for the practice of yoga. So that's how all life becomes yoga, or rather can become yoga. Because as both Dr. Anand Reddy and Dr. Alok Pandey also emphasized, in this short four-word sentence, all life is yoga, can be easily misinterpreted. It doesn't mean all life, no matter how lived, is yoga. What it means is that all life provides us an opportunity for the practice of yoga, and today we have seen how even these postures can help us understand how all life can become yoga if we make good use of the opportunities that life provides. Now coming to a few questions. A yogasana or a yogic posture is a gentle exercise. Of course it is an exercise and it is very gentle. It is an experience. If one does it consciously with the right motive, it becomes an experience. It doesn't remain just an exercise. And it is a prayer. It's a prayer with the body. And therefore, it is in fact all of the above. Next question. Asanas become yoga asanas when taught by a certified yoga teacher, or when they are synchronized with breathing. First one, of course, looks funny, but then one can have a bit of humor in these questions too. An asana becomes a yoga asana when synchronized with breathing. This is like a common misunderstanding. That is only a part of the process of making these movements conscious, because when we synchronize with breathing, that itself helps us make the movement conscious. That can be a first step in the movement becoming conscious when we synchronize it with breathing. Asanas become yogasanas when they are done consciously as a prayer. Yes, that is true. Asanas become yogasanas when they start and end with a mantra. Now, that mantra is again a reminder that it is actually a prayer with the body. But mechanical repetition of mantra will not itself make it that prayer. So like just as synchronizing with breathing by itself will not make it a yogasana, in the same way, a mechanical repetition of the mantra will also not make it a yogasana. Asana becomes a yogasana when done consciously as a prayer. So the best alternative is C. Here's a statement. There are no counter poses for Kati Chakrasana and Meru Vakrasana. That is true. There are no counter poses for these. And the reason given here is Kati Chakrasana and Meru Vakrasana do not stretch the body much. Well, if you've done these postures, you'll find that they stretch the body quite a bit. So the reason is not a true statement. So the assertion is a true statement. Reason is a false statement. But then why do they have no counter poses? They have no counter poses because you're doing them on both sides. So when you turn on the right, the stretch generated by the movement to the right gets neutralized when you turn the body to the left. That is why they do not have a counter pose. The reason is not that they do not stretch the body much. So the reason given is wrong. The reason is a false statement. There's another reason why they do not have a counter pose. Bhujangasana and Dhanurasana can cure diabetes. And the reason generally given by yoga teachers, repeated generation after generation, is that Bhujangasana and Dhanurasana and a few other such practices release insulin from the pancreas because they compress the abdomen and the pancreas is in the abdomen. So when you compress the abdomen, insulin is released. Doesn't happen that way. Pancreas is not a bag of insulin from which you can just release some insulin by squeezing it. And we do not need insulin all the time in the same amount. In fact, if it were possible to release a lot of insulin while doing the postures, the person will go into hypoglycemia. He'll faint because of the low blood sugar levels, if it were possible. It's not possible. It doesn't happen, thankfully. It doesn't happen that way. When do we need insulin more? We need insulin, the largest amount of insulin which is released from the pancreas is soon after a meal. Because that is when we need it to utilize that meal. And when the person is doing these postures, the person is on empty stomach, he has not eaten for at least 4 hours. That is not the time he needs a lot of insulin. So you do not want to squeeze the pancreas and release insulin, even if it was possible. It doesn't happen. So you see, this is the type of misconceptions which are repeated. Just because you add words like insulin and pancreas does not make the explanation scientific or true. Okay. There are mechanisms of the body which ensure that insulin will be released when it is required and the release will be switched off when it is not required. Both types of mechanisms exist in the body, delicately balanced mechanisms. That is how insulin is released or not released, not by performing postures. But then you say, do exercises not contribute at all? Exercise do contribute, all physical activity does. Yogic postures even more than other practices, and yogic practices done with the right attitude even more than just yogic postures. All that is true, but then it is a complex body-mind approach, if one were to sort of summarize it, which can explain it. Not the release of insulin from the pancreas. Now, why I'm saying it so emphatically is also because this myth is so popular that it motivated me to do a study with my students at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences a few years back. We actually measured insulin levels in the blood before and after the postures. There's no insulin release, okay? And that paper is published. These postures do not release insulin. They help. And in fact, we had two types of sets of postures, one which are reputed to help diabetes and one which are not so reputed to help diabetes. The improvement in the diabetes was equal in both cases. So they did improve. I'm not saying that it doesn't work. They did improve, but there was no difference between those who did the postures which are reputed because they squeeze the abdomen and postures which do not squeeze the abdomen. The improvement was just the same in both groups. So assertion that Bhujangasana and Dhanurasana can cure diabetes is a false statement, and the reason is also a false statement. It's not because. So why I'm saying they can cure diabetes? Because firstly, there's no specificity of that type that these asanas will cure diabetes does not exist. And secondly, no asanas can be guaranteed to cure it. They help, but they can't be guaranteed to cure. Mild cases of diabetes, maybe, or just glucose intolerance that is going towards diabetes. They may be able to show normal blood sugar levels. Those who have severe diabetes may be able to control their diabetes on a lower dose of insulin or oral hypoglycemics. The dose may come down. So improvement is there. They can contribute to the management, but to say that they can cure diabetes as a blanket statement is certainly not true. And the mechanism, of course, is also not true, that it's not because of release of insulin from the pancreas. Asanas do not consume much energy, and asanas by themselves are not very useful for losing weight. Now, this again is, both are true. Assertion is a true statement. Reason is also a true statement and a correct explanation for the assertion. Actually, this question is faulty. It should have been, assertion should have been asanas by themselves are not very useful for losing weight. And the reason is asanas do not consume much energy. The assertion and the reason have been reversed, but all the same, you understand what is meant here. Assertions do not consume much energy. Asanas do not improve the cardiorespiratory fitness much. Here again, there is a reversal of the assertion and the reason. Asanas do not improve the cardiorespiratory fitness much because asanas do not consume much energy. Now here, again, they do not consume much energy, that is true. But then as a result of that, it's not that they do not improve the cardiorespiratory fitness much. They do improve the cardiorespiratory fitness remarkably, and that is because of the jogging of the reflexes which improve cardiorespiratory fitness, as we discussed a short while back. Asanas do not consume much energy and they do not help much in strengthening muscles. So they do not help much in strengthening muscles, but that has nothing to do with consuming much energy or not consuming much energy. They do not help much in strengthening muscles because the movements are not repetitive and they are not against resistance. Sarvangasana can cure hypothyroidism. That is the asana which is most often touted as the one which can cure hypothyroidism because you compress the neck. The thyroid is in the neck, you compress the neck, so thyroxine will be released. Again, thyroxine, again the thyroid gland is just like the pancreas, not a bag of thyroxine. Just squeeze it once or twice a day and so thyroxine will come out and then the hypothyroidism will be cured. Doesn't happen. So both are false. Neither cures hypothyroidism nor does it release thyroxine from the thyroid gland. A suggested reading, you'll find a few pages on asanas in this chapter on Hatha Yoga and chapter 2 of a primer on yoga. And this is another book of mine, Back to Health Through Yoga. The first chapter is Yoga, the finest lifestyle ever devised. And in this also you'll find a few pages on the asanas. And in the synthesis of yoga, again there are a few pages on the asanas in the chapter on Hatha Yoga. This is the place where I live and work, and soon we'll be able to show you a better view, or rather a different view of this complex, because now we also have the tableau which you saw on the Republic Day, the tableau on Sri Aurobindo. So that has also come to the ashram, and soon we'll be able to include that in the picture. Welcome to write your questions or comments to essay150yes@gmail.com. I used a number of cartoons which were from the collection of one of my friends, Dr. Satbir Khalsa, who works at the Harvard Medical School, and the pictures showing the asanas, the postures were being done by Vratikarya, who was in the white dress, and Deepa in that dark dress. Gratitude to the Mother and Sri Aurobindo for making it all possible, and thank you all for being there.
Namaste, sir. This is Sonika. I can't hear you.
But we can hear you.
Oh, now I can hear you. Yes, sir. Thank you. So my question is regarding counter asanas. The question is it really important to do them exactly one after the other in succession? For example, so why I'm asking this question is that, while you're performing asanas, during that 1 hour, there is usually an order. So for example, you would perform the standing asanas, then the sitting asanas, then prone, and then supine. And within each category, you would perform like around 3 asanas, right? So now my question is that suppose I perform sitting asana like Ustrasana, then I could perform like 2 to 3 asanas in between and then come to the counter pose, which is Dhanurasana, which is performed like in prone position. So is it important that they should be done in succession, or is it okay to have some other asana squeezed in between?
Yes, I'm glad you asked because this will help us clarify a little further. Firstly, it is important to do them one after the other. Secondly, you'll find that if you're doing standing postures, then a standing posture which requires a counter pose, will have a counter pose in the standing posture itself while you're standing. So, counter pose not only neutralizes the stretch of the previous posture, it also is performed in the same plane, which means a counter pose for lying down posture is also in the lying down position, and a counter pose for a standing posture is also in the standing position. So that's why it becomes possible. Just try to think of, say, any posture in which you are bending forward, say like Padahastasana in standing posture, will be followed by a counter pose in which you are bending backwards in the standing position. In the same way, Ustrasana is followed by Parvatasana, so it comes naturally immediately after that, and you don't have to change your position in any way. You are sitting, and from the sitting you go to the Parvatasana without any further major change in your posture. Or say
I
Setu
see.
Bandhasana and Pavan Muktasana, in both you are lying down on the back
I see. Thank you so much, sir.
in the same plane.
Thank you.
That is what you see sometimes explains when sometimes in exams when we ask the students counterpose some postures, they just think of the movement. For example, if we ask them counterpose for Ustrasana, then instead of Parvatasana, they might say Pavan Muktasana. Now the Pavan Muktasana, yes, the movement is opposite as compared to the Ustrasana, but then they're not in the same plane, so therefore that answer becomes wrong.
Yes, Pramita ji, you can go ahead and ask your question.
Okay, Namaste, sir. My question is, some yoga teachers, they use these wooden blocks, some belts and bolsters and things like that to, adjust the body to perform or do some kind of asanas. So just wanted to know if it is the right approach, or they are just doing it. Uh, I mean, they're just doing it to for their convenience. And my second question is it important to go for a strength training, especially when you are aging along with the asanas, or only these yogic practices and asanas are sufficient to maintain the health and the body?
Yes. Uh, Various types of props and bolsters, etc., are used. In general, they are not in keeping with the spirit of integral yoga because we are not insisting on the that you must move this much, and if you can't somehow or the other, you have to make it possible. So they're not in keeping with the spirit, but all the same, having said that, there are always exceptions. For example, if a woman is trying to do these postures during pregnancy, now, during the third trimester, yogic postures can be done. Some yogic postures can be done. But in the third trimester, her tummy is so much swollen that it helps to have a bolster in some poses. Otherwise, she will not be able to do them, or compress the abdomen in a way that should not be done when the baby is there inside. So, there are exceptions, but by and large, I mean, we don't insist that you should somehow be able to perform the movement, even if it is with the help of a prop or with the help of some appliances. Whatever one can do without equipment is generally enough to stay fit. Second question was about strength training. See, staying fit is important for everybody, but building up rippling muscles is not important for everybody. If one is interested, there's nothing wrong with it. The person can do that. But then, as I said, I mean, the right way to do it would be to once again improve the ability to relax and improve the flexibility before one goes to strength training.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Namaste, Bhaiya. You showed a slide on mental immobility and physical immobility. If the aspiration is to do it every moment, whether it be walking or sitting or even in the thick of action, then what would be the ingredients that would support that? I mean, my own guess is samasthiti, being conscious of the flow of prana and surrender and the aspiration for union. But could you elaborate a bit on that? Thank you.
Well, I mean, if you want the prana to flow freely through the body, then that immobility does become important, and that's how, I mean, all these things go together. The mental immobility and physical immobility, because of the mind body not being strictly separate, also tend to go together, and that's why becoming peaceful in mind will help the body become peaceful, and the body becoming peaceful would help the mind becoming peaceful. That's why in meditative techniques also we start with the first making the body stable and comfortable. That also starts with an asana. The two are interrelated. And while, I mean, you want the body prana to flow through the body properly, the prana is also simultaneously, while flowing through the nervous system, making the nervous system more fit for manifesting more of the consciousness at the mental level. So strictly speaking, one can't really separate one from the other. The body, the life force, and the mental part of the being.
Sir, namaste.
Namaste, Prasad.
Sir, actually, I have two questions. One is that, sir, shall I do the eye exercise and pranayam first and then go for the yogasana, mainly asanas? And second is, during doing the asanas, whether the eye has to be kept it open or it has to be closed actually, closed eye or open eye? Thank you, sir.
The sequence in which we do the practices has a certain logic always. There are, I know, schools of yoga which start with pranayamas. But in Patanjali's scheme, asana comes before pranayama, and we prefer to stick to that. So do asanas before the pranayamas. About the eye exercises, there is strictly no reason when you should do them. You can even do them completely apart anytime during the day. That doesn't require an empty stomach. And one time to do them would be that if you have been sitting in front of a screen continuously for half an hour, 1 hour, and you want to take a break from the screen, which is important for the eyes, good for eye health, then it should be during that break that you can do the eye exercises. The reason why we have built them at a particular place in the postures that we are doing these days also has a logic. The logic is that we do it immediately after that complex of Dhanurasana, Shalavasana, and Bhujangasana, Shalavasana, and Dhanurasana. After that, you get up and start doing the eye exercises. The logic is that then, it gives you an additional period of relaxation. So instead of relaxing for very long in Makarasana after the Dhanurasana, we make you get up and start doing eye exercises, which will again be a sort of a relaxation for the body. So that way we are able to economize a bit on time. So that is the reason why they have been put at that particular spot. But otherwise, eye exercises can be done anytime. And about asanas in relation to pranayamas, most teachers feel that asanas should come before pranayamas, as they do in the Ashtanga. What was the second question? That should the eyes remain open or closed during what?
Normal asanas.
During asanas. With experience, I mean, generally you'll find that you will tend to keep them closed, because that way you feel more relaxed, you can do them more consciously, and you don't need to keep the eyes open while performing the postures. And of course, your question was on eye exercises. While doing the eye exercises, the eyes should be open. And also for balancing poses, like ankle stretch breathing or Vrikshasana, Garudasana, the eyes should be open, because if you keep the eyes open and fix the gaze at some point immediately in front of you, you will be more stable. But in the rest of the postures, by and large, one can keep the eyes closed.
Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Morning. Thank you for the humor in this clarified session. I was really laughing my lungs out on the cartoons. But that's not the way why I raised my hands, because you gave the good and well-known tip, I think, on the nostril breathing for heating up when you are too cold. Is there also, or maybe that's the normal way of nostril breathing, changing left and right nostril for cooling down or for relief of physical pressure in the head? Thank you.
Yes, if one monitors the pattern of breathing for say 24 hours, one finds that one keeps alternating from the one nostril to the other. That is, for some time the right nostril is dominant, which means you are breathing in and out more through the right, and for some time in the day the left nostril, which is dominant. And how much time we spend on right nostril dominance, how much on left nostril dominance, might have something to do with the state of the mind or the physical prakriti of the person. Physical prakriti, is in terms of Ayurveda, in terms of Vata, Pitta and Kapha prakriti, and psychological constitution also may have something to do with it, and that is Rajas, Tamas, Rajas and Sattva, and something may be also related to the current state of mind of the person, the type of mental state the person is in these days, sort of around that period in his life. So all these may contribute to this, because all these affect the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, because that is what essentially determines the dominant pattern. And these are two-way relationships. So while I'm in the sympathetic dominance will affect the dominant nostril, deliberately using a particular nostril becoming dominant, that is, say, the right nostril becoming dominant by using it for breathing in all the time for a few minutes, activates the sympathetic system. And it's by activation of the sympathetic system that makes us feel hot. Adrenaline is released, and that makes us feel warm. On the other hand, left nostril does the opposite, makes us feel cool, because it slows down the sympathetic system. And that's how we feel a little cooler. And it has application also in terms of gaining and losing weight. People who want to lose weight are told to do the right nostril breathing type of exercise. Those who want to gain weight, to do the left. And for that, of course, it has to be done a large number of times. And the usual prescription is 27 rounds at a time, 4 times a day. So by doing that, it could make a contribution. Once again, I'll not say it will definitely do it, or it will cure overweight by this type of right nostril breathing. It can contribute to that along with everything else.
Thank you, sir.
Namaskar, Dr. Saab. One question I have is that sometimes when some thoughts are there in your mind and you are doing asanas, is it right to do that time?
If one waits for a time when there are no thoughts, one will never be able to do that. We are all having plenty of thoughts all the time. But then, during meditation, we have methods of silencing the surface activity of the mind. The asanas themselves can also become a meditative experience. We don't call them meditation, but then they can become meditative in character. And that is what all the consciousness, bringing in the consciousness into the postures, bringing in a certain attitude into the postures, essentially it boils down to making of them more and more of a meditative experience. And that's how rather than saying that can one start doing these postures when one has plenty of thoughts, one can say that yes, one can start them anytime and then do them in such a way that one does not have that many thoughts by the time when you finish the session. You should be mentally also relaxed and with a far less density of stray unwanted thoughts.
Thank you.
one question in the chat box. Vajrasana causes pain in ankle. Is it normal?
Yes, to some extent it is normal. With habit, it will become less. Also, you may work out a certain pattern of doing it which is more comfortable for you. For example, the usual sometimes said that you cross the feet at the back and then sit on the space between the heels. I also find it very difficult to do that. The way I do it is, the way I have worked out is that actually I sit without crossing the feet. The feet are parallel to each other, and then I rest the hardest part of my buttocks, which is called ischial tuberosity, that part on the heels. And then I'm able to do it quite easily for pretty long. So you have to sort of understand your own body and do it the way you are most comfortable. The important thing is you should be stable and comfortable.
The next question is, you mentioned that asanas doesn't cure hypothyroidism, but what about hyperthyroidism? And if yes, then how and which set of asanas?
Firstly, it cures neither of them. Asanas by themselves do not cure any disease. You'll say that some people claim, yes, people make a lot of claims, but then, and also there are documented cases of cures of all types. But not only they are rare, they require an application of the type and intensity which borders on what is required in, say, Hatha Yoga. They said all 24 hours a day you are preoccupied with that. There's a person called Joe Dispenza. He has written a book on how he himself came out of a paralysis. All doctors had told him it's impossible for you to regain function of your nervous system. Injury is beyond repair. But then the concentration, and then he applied his mind to it, and over a few years he came out of it and has written a book on it, Joe Dispenza. Now, how many Joe Dispenzas in the world? That is firstly. Secondly, now coming back to hyperthyroidism. Hyperthyroidism is a different type of problem as compared to hypo. They are just the opposite, as the name indicates. And once again, the usual sort of way I handle sort of this type of issues is that why do you look upon yourself only as a disease of the thyroid or disease of the pancreas or disease of the joints? Look upon yourself as a whole human being. To take this hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism as a trigger, as an opportunity which has motivated you to turn to something which can make you healthy as a whole human being. You are not just that part of the body. And not only that, it has benefits which can go far beyond your physical health. So use it as a trigger, as an opportunity, as a blessing, which made you look at something which can help you stay fit today, avoid many of the health-related issues which might have arisen in future, make you more peaceful now, and ensure that you'll remain peaceful in spite of all the problems you may have in future, and you'll also end up fulfilling the genuine purpose of life, which is spiritual in nature. So look, take it as an opportunity which has opened up to you because of this one health-related issue. So do not look for a specific treatment or look for a cure for that disease in these asanas, number one. Number two, so that way, as a human being, no matter what the person has, hypothyroidism or hyperthyroidism, the person will benefit immensely by practicing yoga. The more comprehensive a view of yoga you take, the more you will benefit. Even a half-hearted performance of only the physical practice as physical practices itself also achieves something. So if that type of half-hearted practice of a few selected postures can achieve that much, you can imagine how much more can be gained if we do it in the proper spirit. So that would be the way to look at it. But hyperthyroidism, the conventional treatment is that either one uses drugs which destroy a part of the thyroid, or use radiation to destroy a part of the thyroid, or a surgeon removes a part of the thyroid or the whole of the thyroid and then you supplement with thyroxine. So these are the conventional approaches which are more sort of logical and go straight to the organ which is involved, not the underlying causes. Because the underlying causes might have been in terms of some psychological issues or environmental insults or whatever. That's why probably these lifestyle diseases are going up. The thyroid related problems particularly are increasing, it seems, because of stress as well as probably some environmental stressors outside us. So they are increasing. One doesn't know exactly why they are increasing, whether it's more of the environment or more of the stress related issues in the person, but they are increasing. But without going into that underlying cause, what modern medicine does is to, in case of hypothyroidism, provide thyroxine from outside. In case of hyperthyroidism, one of the 2 or 3 approaches that I told you, so that you reduce the amount of thyroid that is functioning, they work dramatically because you're going straight to the immediate cause. But at the same time, if one takes care of the underlying causes, which yoga does, it may not be enough to cure this particular present health related issue. It may not be enough to cure. That's why they may not cure. But it will make you a healthier person in the true sense of the word, physically, mentally, and spiritually. That yoga will ensure. So that is the guarantee you can have from yoga. Not that this immediate health issue which has made you turn to yoga will be cured by yoga. That is not what may necessarily happen. Because you see, there's a limitation to the physical. Once the physical part of the body, a certain part of the body, be it thyroid or be it joints or be it the pancreas, has been damaged beyond a certain point, the mind-body approach, which is letting the prana act more on the body, will have limitations. It may not be possible to always reverse that completely by using this approach, and in different parts of the body that approach has varying efficacy. For example, the mother has said that it has relatively less efficacy on the teeth and bones. Now, you see, one can imagine if one says that, well, my teeth are decaying, so the teeth decayed because the person neglected what the person is eating and dental hygiene. Both these things contribute in a major way to dental health. So the person neglected his health. Now his teeth has a lot of cavities. Now the person says, I don't want root canal treatment. I don't want to get my teeth extracted. I just want to practice yoga and do it. It will not work on the teeth. The teeth will not start growing again. The cavity will not disappear because of the mind-body approach. So the physical has its limitations. Okay. Joe Dispenza. Joe Dispenza, Dispenza.
There is one last question in the chat box. Is it true if you make the opposite circulation of breathing in a posture, you change from relax to excite? Can you give some examples?
I'm not very clear about the question, but in this principle of excitation followed by relaxation is followed in some yogic practices, particularly in a technique called cyclic meditation, which is an innovation of Swami Vivekananda Yoga Anusandhan Samsthan, SVASA. So they call it cyclic meditation, and the basic principle is that relaxation by itself may not be as effective as a bit of stretching followed by relaxation. So relaxation feels more relaxing if it is following a particular stretch. Of course, we are doing that all the time in yogic postures. A stretch is alternating with relaxation, but it can be done in a more deliberate fashion, and that is what done in stress relaxation. Something like, you can visualize it like this, that if you have a balloon which is inflated, then if you puncture it somewhere, then the immediate relaxation which comes in the balloon can be appreciated better than in a balloon which had never been inflated. And this is also done in another technique which also is a SVASA innovation, and that is instant relaxation technique. That is, while sitting in the office, you want to relax yourself quickly, instantly. So that's why I call instant relaxation. So sitting in the chair, you start from the toes and go up to the top and tighten each part of your body one by one till when you reach the hands, you're doing this and then let go. Relax suddenly. So that gives you instant relaxation. So you tighten the body, tighten, and then go. Total relaxation. So this, maybe, I don't know, maybe this is what you had in mind. The tightening and relaxation. Does that answer your question, or something else that you had in mind?
Can I speak? Okay, thank you. Hello. For example, in the yogic breathing, when we inflate the balloon, like you said, is helping for someone is in anxiety, is going down the anxiety, right? I'm using it as a therapeutic process. Which one is in a panic attack or is in an anxiety situation? I bring her attention to the breathing in with the balloon abdomen, okay? And all the process like you mentioned before. But my question is, in the case of depression, if someone is in depressed, can we do the opposite? Like to bring the air in, inhale, but bringing the abdomen in the same time. Can we reverse the system from the depressed to the stimulus as we reverse from the anxiety to relax? Thank you.
Again, I'm not very sure about the total question. Firstly, I mean, the question is about depression. And probably you are trying to ask whether in depression the person can modify the alternate nostril breathing pattern in a way that it will help the person. Yes, probably right nostril breathing will help the person because the person is depressed. A bit of activation of the sympathetic would help if the person goes to a right nostril dominant pattern of breathing by breathing in through the right all the time and maybe breathing out through the left, but breathing in through the right all the time. The second part of the question probably was that normally we say that as the person breathes in, the abdomen should go out. And while breathing out, it should go in. Can that be reversed? No, that should not be reversed because the idea is not to reverse the entire pattern of breathing. The idea is to use the breathing to activate the sympathetic nervous system, but not the mechanics of breathing don't have to be disturbed. If it is more normal for the person to breathe in such a way that the diaphragm goes down so that the abdomen goes out while breathing in, that still continues irrespective of which nostril is being used. So the nostril which we are using doesn't have to be related to the movement of the diaphragm. The diaphragm will move that same way irrespective of which nostril or nostrils are being used for breathing. Coming to depression, again, in depression what is advocated is what is called dynamic yoga, which means that instead of doing this extremely slow, gentle and graceful movements, one makes a little deliberate deviation in their case and makes the yoga a little more energetic, because that is what will help in bringing them out of the depression. So we, instead of making the movements so slow, we make them faster. Instead of doing them only once, we make them repetitive. That is, each posture can be done several times. And there are certain other things which are also added, like say during the warm-up, stationary jogging, and maybe even a bit of jogging and brisk walk sometime during the day or again during the warm-up. So more of Surya Namaskar if they can do it. So those are the things which Surya Namaskar and performed at a little faster pace. So these are some of the things which we call dynamic yoga, and that helps in bringing them out of depression.
Okay. That will be on.
Okay.
So with that, we come to the closing of yet another session. Next class will be on Monday. We will be talking about pranayam techniques. Today we end with meditative music. Thank you everyone.